So the big topic is this infrastructure bill that Congress is potentially pushing through in the next couple of weeks here, and they're claiming that they're going to be raising $30 billion a year from taxing crypto.
As this bill gets ironed out, but even like further looking down the pike, what are you keeping your eyes on for the crypto community in the regulation space?
Well, I think we should all be very sensitive and alert to arguments that cryptocurrency is dangerous, is unregulated. And I think we should ask, whenever we start hearing lobbyists and congressional representatives talking in those terms, who is behind this and who is benefiting from this? I don't think we've seen a full court press against crypto yet, but I'm certain that it's coming.
I'm fascinated to watch this because when I was at UBS, I used to joke with the team. I was like, our tech was so bad, still is. I say our, I guess they raised me, if you will. I was there for 8 or 9 years. But we're so bad, they should have died, right? If you want to look at it, like they are Kodak in a digital world, right?
Yeah.
But what has protected them, and a number of other industries too, but this one in particular, is the moat of regulation around their business. It's a moat that protects them.
I find this really fun. I feel like giggly.
It is fun. It is fun. Welcome back to your Yang Speaks weekly update featuring everybody but Andrew Yang. You're featuring yours truly, Zach Rauman, and the one and only Carly Riley. Good to be back, Carl. How we doing?
Always good to be here. Always good to be back for our Thursday apps.
Oh yeah, today's episode's a good one. We're going to talk about Simone Biles, which everybody's talking about in the Olympics, and we are going to talk about this new cryptocurrency regulation that is coming down the pipe.
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
go with that.
It hasn't passed yet. It's potential, proposed, if you will.
It's not.
But one of the things
Is it
we
a
want to do.
regulation?
It's a proposed regulation. One of the things we want to do is talk about on this podcast what everybody's talking about, help you navigate it, and also talk about what no one's talking about, because we've had a lot of conversations on why there are narratives in our media and want to help you navigate that. That's why we're here every Thursday, tuning in to this version of Yang Speaks, the best version where he doesn't speak. That's not true or fair to Andrew, but it is true in this episode. Glad you're here. Let's dive in. Simone Biles. She has, so a couple things. As of, we're recording this on August 3rd for an August 5th episode when you're listening to it. So as of today, here's where she stands. She originally, about a week ago from today, had dropped out of the Team USA all-around team women's gymnastics competition. And actually entered back in and got a bronze medal on the balance beam individual event. But she had dropped out because we were told mental health concerns, and eventually we learned they were called, she said she had the twisties, and the mental wasn't right. And this has sparked, frustratingly so, I think for you too, Carly, and for many of us, it has sparked a very polarizing, fiery debate. And it's been, when I say polarizing, it's almost politicized, which is frustrating. But you have many on the left in particular, but many are saying, go on, Queen, we're so proud of you. You're the GOAT for doing this, for prioritizing mental health. You're amazing. You do you. And then on the right, or just people in general, like, wow, that's soft. What the hell? You bailed on your country. You left us, yada, yada, yada. And this actually comes, let's call it a month or so after Naomi Osaka, one of the best tennis player in the world right now, was a female tennis player in the world, had dropped out of the French Open after she was fined for not doing her press obligations, citing mental health, and she hates doing her press things, gives her anxiety, didn't want to do it. She's like, peace. So this is the pinnacle of this kind of mental health and athletics conversation. So Carly,
I think on the left there, you said it's like a you do you thing, but it's more than that. It's a she's a hero. There's a narrative of like, what she did there was braver and more radical than performing and getting a gold. Right. And then I think it is very much the right that is the backlash to that, saying, why are we worshiping people for not being able to do their jobs? That's stupid, and everything that's wrong with like weak liberal culture. I think that's sort of your dichotomy there.
And I want Carly, I want you to, so we had this conversation just casually, not thinking we'd bring it up on the podcast, because I thought it was covered well, and I thought the media was missing something, was why I insisted on us having this conversation. But I was be honest, this is a growth moment for Zach, because I think my gut reaction was like the asshole, was like, what the hell, you just bailed on the country, screw you. Now don't get me wrong, I really like and respect, she's fucking amazing, Simone Biles, I respect her a lot, but that was my gut reaction, and I've learned through conversation with a number of people, which we're going to get into, where we probably should land as a society, not just like the opinion, but helping you guys navigate these kind of very polarizing, fierce narratives. So when you're at your cocktail parties or tailgates or whatever, and people talk about it, maybe you can be the voice of reason. So Carly, give us your thoughts on, I know you have thoughts on Simone Biles, so let's start there and I'll give my thoughts.
Sure. Well, and I think your initial reaction, the comparison you gave was like, look, Josh Allen being your quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, if Josh Allen suddenly like didn't want to perform at the Super Bowl, like, you know, that's
I'd be very upset.
Yeah, like, you know, that was sort of your comparison. And I think what's happening for people on the right or people like yourself is there's this feeling that the younger generation are like soft in general, and we're very sensitive, and it's the snowflake generation, and so like, oh, like we can't handle anything and trigger warnings and this and that. And I think there is a certain, yes, and I think there's a certain level of legitimacy to frustrations around that. I tend to be much more sympathetic to all of those things than I am critical of them, but I understand that that's like the impression, and so I think this triggered that for the right. Correct. And that's why they had that reaction. And for me, what was missing in that reaction is the recognition that Simone Biles is not that fucking person. Like, Simone Biles has won, 4 gold medals? Like, to be an Olympic athlete, your work ethic and your perfectionism and your commitment to grind it out day after day. I mean, the woman was sexually assaulted by her coach and is like out there continuing to like work her ass off. Like, this person is the polar opposite of the kind of like
special snowflake slave
who's like doesn't want to work that hard, who's kind of like lazy, like isn't gonna, thinks they deserve to be the CEO without putting in the work. Like, that is so not who this person is. And when I think about that type of person, like, they're hurt more than anybody if they can't perform. Like, she has been working for years for these moments. Like, she's not making this decision lightly, or because she's like, oh, like I just like I'm having like a bad day. Like, do you know what I mean? Like this, like I'm just like in my feelings. Like, that's not who this person is, and it feels like such a clear misinterpretation of this woman to lump her in that category at all. So that's why I just really felt like that perspective was way off base.
And you said that, and it opened up like a bell went off, or it just like clicked in my head, like, oh yeah, she's not the special. She, like, in order to compete at that level, you're up at 5 a.m. every day for decades, since you were a child, beating yourself up on the mat and learning.
Yeah.
And to be at the top of your game where she is, I mean, she is the greatest of all time. She's the most decorated Olympic gymnast of all time. So I have 5 thoughts. I'm gonna run down quick.
Oh boy.
I have 5 thoughts. One, be clear, Simone Biles is fucking awesome. She doesn't know anybody anything. She's considered the greatest of all time. She was the last team member who was who was sexually assaulted by Larry Nassar, who was the complete scumbag from Michigan State University, and the coach or the trainer on the Olympic team, who I can't even say what this fucker did. You can Google him. God. But she stayed. She did not have to stay after she won all those golds in Rio in 2016. She stayed because she thought it would be a good voice for the girls who had aged out when they're going to be in the national spotlight in 2020, and then stayed an extra year in 2021 when the Olympics were canceled. So she doesn't know anybody anything. She's won 7. I don't know if this includes the most recent gold medal. I think it's 8. I don't think, but maybe she's won 7 Olympic medals, 4 of them gold, 1 silver, 2 bronze. A couple of those are team, but and then world champions. I mean, she has won when she's not competing in the Olympics. We're not paying attention. She has 19 world championships. Like, she is the greatest gymnast we've ever fielded, and she's fucking awesome, and we should love her for it. And I do. That's number 1. Number 2. I think millennials are soft. I think I'm soft myself at times. I think our generation's a little pandered. But I agree with you 100%. Simone Biles is not one of them to be calling soft.
Yeah, and what I would say even on that front, and this is a separate debate. Like you and I debate determinism sometimes, and I tend to a little bit err on the side of like there is no free will, Sam Harris style. Like we are made up of two things.
We'll have a combo on that sometime.
No, that doesn't have to be this combo. My point with this is like I tend not to judge or blame people for being the way that they are, right? Like because it's a combination of your genetics and the way you were raised, both of which were out of your control, that like made you such a way. And so if you can't really help I just don't tend to be very judgmental.
You're gonna open a can
you
of
and I
worms to me
disagree.
right now.
I know.
Look at me biting my tongue. I'm not going to talk about it right now. But I will say this: whether we think it's our fault as a generation or not, mental health in the United States, objectively, is getting worse. A lot
Absolutely.
worse. Especially particularly among young people. So the Mental Health America, which is a mental health nonprofit, so probably is skewing a little bias to, they probably overcount rather than undercount, but.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's in their.
I mean, how is it getting reported, right? Like, what is?
They do their surveys, right? Anyway, I don't want to debate the quality of the survey. But even if they're conservative, even these numbers are aggressive, you dial them down, they're still really terrifying. At 9.7, almost 10% of youth in the United States have severe major depression. That's 1 in 10 of our young people, compared to just over 9% last year. So it's gone up in the past. Let's call it the pandemic. 7 months.
I'm sure was not.
Did not help.
Has not been the environment to help mental health.
And if you identify as more than one race, it's at 12.4%. So it's gone higher there. And then the other one is 19% of adults, almost 20% of adults suffer from a mental illness. So this is bad. All right, we're struggling as a country. So mental health is a real thing. It's whether we want to call us soft or not. The fact is, like, we're all mentally fucked right now. So it is a challenge, and we need to take it seriously because it's killing us in many ways. So that was number 2. Number 3, the twisties, which she talked about. I did some research on what the twisties are, and by research I mean I talked to my friend, one of my best friends. We just had his wedding a couple like a month ago.
Very fun wedding. Shout out. Yeah,
shout out Max Saber. He was a college gymnast at and his girlfriend. They met. They were both gymnasts. Kind of cute. They were at William & Mary Division I college gymnastics program. Sadly, no longer, I don't believe the program no longer exists. They just canceled it. But anyway, Max Saber, my buddy, is the college gymnast at William & Mary, Division I, very competitive gymnast, him and his girlfriend. Here's what he had to say. He said, and I'm going to quote him, quote, "I'm 99% sure, Simone, she didn't just give up. In gymnastics, there is something called the twisties. It's when you're in the air and you have no, capitalized N-O, no idea if your body is flipping or twisting. Your wires get crossed. You don't know where the ground is, and you get, quote, lost in the air. Happens to a lot of gymnasts. Happened to me," quoting Max. He said, "it's really scary and frustrating. It usually takes a while to fix. It's like the gymnast's version of Tiger Woods getting the yips at the Masters, except he can't die from shanking a golf ball.
Yep.
She could." And
I think this is such an important point, because this was going to be the second thing I said about your Josh Allen comparison is and football is even more, call it dangerous if you mess it up, than golf, for example, but still you're not talking about a situation where you can end up snapping your neck and paralyzed. Like, she so clearly was making, truly though, Zach, like, what can you contract
leave the football field paralyzed all the time. So,
what can you contract though as a footballer? Like, just if you're mentally off your game, it does not feel comparable, right?
Well, I will say, like, if your mind isn't right, gymnastics is one of the worst sports to be doing if your mind's off, if not the worst. Maybe it's like luge or some of the Olympic sports are people die. Someone died at the Olympics, the last Winter Olympics we had, or maybe 2 of them, on either it was luge or skeleton course. Mental's massively important, and the twisties are a real thing. If you talk to any gymnast, because that's what he said, like, if you talk to any single person that I've competed with, they know what the twisties are. And so when she went back to compete on the balance beam, she actually changed the end of her routine because she wasn't comfortable doing this flip in a safe way, or dismount, she said. Now, fourth thing I want to say is this is a very interesting perspective, I think, for all of us, because Simone's quote said, and she quoted, "At the end of the day, we're not just entertainment, we're human beings, the we being athletes." And I think this is fun, and I think the internet has a lot to do with this. But the dynamic we have between fans and athletes, and ownership and athletes, and all the pressures, the TV, the sponsorships, that sort of thing, that is changing. We do not own these athletes like we used to maybe feel like we did. They don't work for us. once these athletes, in many ways, have established that they're good or great, they've established, and some of the people we're talking about, if they've established their dominance and they get paid and they fulfill their obligations of their contracts to get paid, they can do whatever they want. So you're Tiger, LeBron, Naomi Osaka, we're talking about Serena Williams, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan. They don't know a shit. We are lucky to watch them play. And it's one of the things I hate, all the hate that people put on right now, LeBron James, because he's, whether you think he's better or not than MJ, we could have a debate on that on this podcast. But whether you think he's better than MJ or not, who cares? He's up there. Sit back and enjoy it, because we get to walk the planet at the same time. One of the greatest of all time to ever do it is playing in prime time anytime we want. So they don't owe us anything. Once they're at a certain level, LeBron James does not have to keep playing. Michael Jordan dropped out after 3 championships. He did come back. He's like, this is exhausting mentally and physically. And I don't need it.
It's a huge win on every level to me that as a society, athletes can start putting themselves first. Forget whether or not we even think it's legitimate or not. Like, or, you know, if she's sufficiently mentally unhealthy, if she's sufficiently hardworking to deserve it, like, none of that really matters. Like, at the end of the day, like, she has every right as an autonomous individual to put herself first. And I think
she wants to go canoe out in the middle of nowhere. Go for it. That sucks, but she can do it.
One of the comparisons that I think is really valuable here is, I think, the athlete Carrie Strug, is that her name? Have you read about her?
Yeah.
And I think it's so striking. I mean, Carrie Strug performed in the 1996 Olympics and she hurt her ankle. And then she continued to perform. She ended up winning the gold after she severely hurt her ankle during one of the events. But
she landed her last, I was a kid when this happened. She landed her last routine and made with the smile and then collapsed in pain. She was, maybe she was showboating, who knows?
No, she wasn't. From a longevity perspective, it actually hurt her career in the long run to do that. And what she said, and I think part of it was also being a woman, she just felt like she wasn't allowed to stand up to authorities. There's this, and I relate to this, there's this good girl thing that whatever creates it, you just have this feeling like you need to please other people. And I think Simone and Naomi and these women who are breaking out from that mold and being willing to not please other people for the sake of putting their own health first is such a good message to be sending, which is why from out the gate I loved this move. I understand though, do we need to make people utter heroes for this? The media is hyperbolic, but I think it's absolutely a fantastic message to send to people that you get to make your own decisions and it doesn't matter what call it the grown-ups around you are telling you need to do, etc.
Look, if you want to talk about pressure and if you think if you've ever felt overwhelmed in life, imagine being a pro athlete at the top of their game. Yes, you get to play a game for a living. Yes, you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Yes, you're famous and superstar and you have all these gifts, but it's incredibly pressure filled. And I remember watching the Tiger documentary on HBO, which is fantastic. And they put immense amount of pressure on Tiger. That first Nike ad before he had ever played a professional golf tournament, an actual professional, he was still an amateur before then, set the stage for holy shit, here comes Tiger. Now he delivered, but the pressure we put on pro athletes is enormous. And at a certain point, they have every right to be like, F you, I don't care. So this brings me to my last point number 5. And this is what I believe, you might disagree, but I feel pretty strongly about this. Number 5. It is okay to be disappointed. And that's where that doesn't mean you vilify them, but it's okay. To your analogy you were talking about, I thought if Josh Allen led the Bills to the Super Bowl, and on the day of game day, he's like, I can't see straight, I can't throw the ball straight, I'm going to get hurt out there, I'm going to hurt the team, and he dropped out and he said, I'm not playing today, I would be devastated. I'd be mad, I'd be angry, I'd be disappointed, but I'd be happy he's safe, but I would be really bummed. And the better analogy is probably Tom Brady, because he's actually the GOAT, and he's already won 6, 7 championships, whatever it is. If he went to a Super Bowl to win the 8th, and he's like, I'm going to get hurt out there, I don't feel safe, I would feel so disappointed if I was a Pats fan. But he doesn't owe me shit. And we all... I think it's un-American to not want to go watch Simone Biles kick everybody's ass. She's so good. Sure. She made up her own flip. It's called the Biles. That's we all wanted to watch that. I'm up at 4 in the morning fucking watching it. Of course it's
okay to be disappointed about not being able to see her play. That's different than acting that out on her.
But being angry for sure. Agreed. But I also felt like there was a sense that people were like, this makes her even better, or how dare you ever doubt the queen.
Well, I do think
Simone.
It makes her better. Because again, she's setting a really good example for
I agree with that.
Young people, everything we just talked about. So of course it's a wonderful thing that adds layers to the way in which she's a role model.
Being disappointed that you didn't get to watch your favorite athlete play is not an excuse to call her soft, because that's inaccurate. And that's kind of the big one here. Like, I think there's a media narrative, or to judge her. Like, there's a media narrative that she's soft. That's something. I mean, hell, she had the twisties and came back and won a fucking bronze medal. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. She's incredible. We do have a mental health crisis. I do think we're a little too like me generation and like not doing our, like that's a whole nother conversation. Simone Biles should be above that, and I think it's fair to help navigate that.
Here is an interesting tweet. Somebody was saying, how is it that mental health is an okay excuse for a school shooter, but not for an Olympic athlete? And I'm wondering your thoughts on this. The idea there being that like the right will cry, oh, it's a mental health issue as soon as we have a school shooter, but like somehow they're dismissive of mental health issues when it's an athlete who suddenly, can't perform at the Olympics. Do you think that's a fair accusation to level, or an interesting like point to be made?
Well, if your point is that that our political parties or pundits, politicians or whoever, the right and left, have hypocrisies, then this is one of them. If your point is to compare the two, I don't know, they feel like apples and oranges because no one's dying besides the athlete in an Olympic gymnast competition, but in a school shooting.
Well, no, the point is like, okay, Republicans acknowledge the existence of mental health when it's convenient for them, right? So when they want to use it to not talk about a gun problem, then mental health exists and it's a real problem. When the left tries to suggest that's what's going on in an Olympic game, it's like, oh, whatever, we're not going to celebrate this. And to be fair, I think part of the narrative on the right was less like, oh, she's so weak. Like, Ben Shapiro tweeted, like, I'm not going to act like she's a hero, or like there's anything wrong with her dropping out.
Yeah.
Like, he sort of took, I think there was a lot of
Ben Shapiro, and I always feel like that's when things have gone wrong.
I don't agree. I fully,
he can just be an ass.
I fully think it's great that she did this, and I think it does set a good example. But I do think that part of the reaction that I was having was like, okay, why are we glamorizing this to the extent that we are? Whatever. Yeah. Separate.
I understand that. I didn't like the glamorizing either, but I was proud that she was like.
And I think it actually is really healthy. Now, is there a risk that you have some people who like use this as an excuse to not push themselves to the limits that they very well could push themselves to, because they're like, well, I'm prioritizing my mental health. I guess perhaps, but I in general think it's actually really good.
Yeah. I think.
Okay.
How about this? If you win, you can. If you win 4 gold medals, you can take a playoff over here and there. Here.
Okay, thanks. Good to know.
Simone Biles, you're a badass. It was awesome watching you. We loved your run. I hope you come back. You're probably good enough to do it late into your 20s, even your 30s, but who knows? And I hope she gets better. I think the twisties are a thing, and I hope she is able to get past them. Cool. Okay.
I'm very excited about this next topic. This no one is talking about topic, which, to be fair, in my world, everyone or many people are talking about it, but I recognize in the broader world,
like you're some like queen, like special. Sorry, you're on the crypto discords that
Snowflake.
I don't know what the fuck those are.
Snowflake. No, it's this. In the new infrastructure bill that has been proposed in Congress, part of the way they are suggesting they will raise the money necessary to build all of our new infrastructure and replace all of our bad old infrastructure is through a new tax levied on, call it cryptocurrency users. And this has raised a lot of controversy in the crypto community, largely because the bill has been written in a way that's like incredibly tech illiterate. Shocker of all shockers. Congress knows nothing about crypto or tech. This is why you need young people in Congress who actually know what's happening there. Shout out Yang Gang, but you know what? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Or in the presidency. So we talked to my good friend Dashiell Shapiro, who has been a longtime supporter of Andrew Yang. He and I met on the presidential campaign. He was a donor. He helped fundraise for us. He's awesome. He also happens to be a really badass tax attorney who he's worked with the Justice Department before, and he now works with a whole number of like crypto whales basically and helps advise them on how to pay taxes in crypto. So we talked to him to ask him a bunch of questions about how we should understand this new regulation being proposed, what might be coming down the pike in the future. It was super fun. It gets a little nerdy and in the weeds, but I love it.
Yeah, but for those of you thinking like, crypto regulations, I don't know, this shit is going to matter whether you like it or not. It's going to hit our lives, it's going to be a tidal wave at some point, and this is the beginning of that. So Dashiell Shapiro and Carly and Zach breaking down the cool stuff right now. Tune in. Check it out.
All right. A big welcome to Dashiell Shapiro. Dashiell, I'm so excited to have you. You and I have been friends now, honestly, for a while since the Yang campaign. And I'll have you kind of introduce who you are and what you do, but here's how I have explained it to multiple people when talking about you. You are a tax attorney who is really carving out a niche for yourself as a bit of a crypto tax specialist, and you work with a number of big crypto players to advise them on how to do their taxes in this universe where the government has offered very little guidance about what technically you need to do when making money in crypto. Yeah,
so thanks, Carly and Zach, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think that's a pretty good summary. Just to give a little bit of background to how I got here. I after law school, I went straight to the Department of Justice Tax Division, and I was there for 7 years, basically prosecuting tax cases for the government. And I got into crypto early on, in like 2013, 2014. And it's been fun to see how the IRS and Congress try to get a handle on cryptocurrency tax issues. A lot of what I do is trying to figure out what the rules should be and how taxpayers can navigate uncertain situations and anticipate what the IRS and Congress are going to do. And that's always a tricky issue, but it's one that's really fun because my background's in both tax controversy and then financial products like equity derivatives and debt instruments. So those two worlds kind of collide in decentralized cryptocurrency financial products.
That's awesome.
Frankly, you're like the man for the hour right now if you understand complex products and nonsense tax code,
yes,
which is what we're navigating right now.
So the big topic is this infrastructure bill that Congress is potentially pushing through in the next couple of weeks here, and they're claiming that they are going to be raising $30 billion a year from taxing crypto. Can you explain to us what's going on here, what this plan says in layman people's speak?
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit more, there's probably anywhere between $600 billion and $1 trillion a year that represents the tax gap. Now, the tax gap is the difference between revenue that should be collected if everybody was honest on their tax returns and then what the situation is that we have. Many Americans don't fully report and pay all of their gains that they should. So the government is always looking for revenue raisers, and whenever you have a large bill, many congressmen and senators say, we're not going to vote for this bill until you can show us that every dollar is paid for. So the cryptocurrency tax provisions were born in that need to find revenue to pay for the infrastructure bill. So they're probably a small percentage of the infrastructure bill, but still, I think it's $28 billion was the revenue score they got from probably Joint Committee on Taxation, and that's a sizable sum, and so it's an important issue. The cryptocurrency tax provision was just came out, I think it was last week, and it generated a lot of controversy because it was one of these provisions that's written in the back room without consultation from industry participants, and then a bunch of people.
So it's a bunch of like octogenarian Congress people who don't understand crypto trying to write a tax.
Crypto
bill about how to get crypto.
Right. Well, apparently Rob Portman, who appears to his office, apparently wrote the language of the bill. He's supposedly the congressional expert on cryptocurrency. So I don't know how much.
Yeah. Do we feel safe or what?
But the bill doesn't make a lot of sense as it was initially drafted, and it was criticized almost immediately by cryptocurrency industry groups, and then also Rob Portman, who's a Republican from Ohio, criticized it. Ron Wyden, who's a Democrat from Oregon, also criticized the language of the bill, and they've resolved to go back and fix it. They've tinkered with the language a little bit, and presumably the final language is not going to have the same defects that the original language did.
So, understanding that there might be changes, and therefore not to harp on this too long, but quickly, do you want to just tell us how in this original version they planned to get the $28 billion a year? Like, what are they taxing? What is happening?
Yeah, well, basically, Congress, the reasonable thing for Congress to do here, which was in the original legislation, is to just say, if there's a broker who is facilitating cryptocurrency transactions, buying and selling cryptocurrency, that broker should report those transactions to the IRS, and then the IRS can see what tax should be paid, hasn't been paid, and so forth. And that, in theory, doesn't generate a lot of controversy, right? Coinbase has had to turn over its customer records to the IRS, and in some sense, it's good for the cryptocurrency industry if there are these basic rules, because then Coinbase doesn't have to worry about getting summonses every year for its customer record. They can just have a baseline that they communicate this stuff to the IRS. Their customers know that, and it doesn't have to be a big surprise every time there's an enforcement action against Coinbase for their customer record. So that part is not that controversial. The controversy came in when the language describing who a broker is had very broad language that seemed to apply not only to Coinbase or Kraken or the known exchanges of the world, but also to sort of anybody that was sending Bitcoin to somebody else or facilitating a payment, or potentially even someone that wrote some software for a platform that was used by people to transact in cryptocurrencies. And that was the part that pretty much everybody said, wait, this doesn't make any sense. It's unworkable. Everybody's going to be subject to these reporting rules. And how can you report on tax information? You don't even know who your counterparty is. You don't even know, if you're sending Bitcoin to someone online, you don't always know who's on the other side of those transactions. So it would be unreasonable, I think, to require information reporting to the IRS for software developers, miners, and anybody that touches any aspect of crypto.
And the part of the problem there is it literally can't be done, right? And so what you end up in a situation where you actually just shut down part of the industry, which then you're not generating the revenue at all, right? Like then you're not getting the money that you want to be getting because you're just shutting down the industry because these regulations can't be complied with. Is that right? That was sort of the thrust of what I was sensing from it.
That was what a lot of industry participants were saying. That was the outcry about this. I kind of find it hard to believe that the initial language would have passed anyways, and even if it would have passed it would have shut down the cryptocurrency industry. I think it would have been immediately obvious that these are unenforceable provisions, and I think most people would have just went about their daily business. You might have had some problems where funding from large investment banks and regulated entities might have been difficult to obtain if there was this cloud of uncertainty over it. But it would have been a provision that didn't make any sense, wasn't enforceable. So it's hard to imagine that it would have destroyed the cryptocurrency industry. But I think it would have caused a cloud over the industry, and I'm glad it's being addressed.
The initial outrage seemed to imply that Congress knew what they were doing and was intentionally trying to overregulate this. And it sounds like, or that was what I interpreted. It sounds like what you're saying is this was probably just Congress not having any idea what they were talking about, and we don't need to be the outrage was maybe overblown because they weren't actually trying to kill crypto. They were just being morons. Is that a non-legal way of framing this?
Yes and no. I think the interesting thing here is that I think Rob Portman, he's described as the resident expert on crypto in Congress. And I think he actually might have been onto something with this language, because he is sort of zeroing in on the fact that there's a tremendous amount of cryptocurrency transactions that are not currently being reported. They're not currently subject to any regulation. And I think you don't want to address this in a revenue raiser that's tacked on to the infrastructure bill at the 11th hour. It's not the best way to address this, but there is a real problem that eventually Congress is going to have to grapple with, which is what do you do with decentralized exchanges and exchanges that don't have custody over transactions. I mean, right now, if the government wants to regulate derivatives and lending, there's easy ways to do that. But what if most lending in 10 years or most derivatives in 10 years are not being conducted through brokers and exchanges, but they're being conducted through smart contracts and on decentralized exchanges where nobody has custody of those funds, and there's no party you can look to for enforcement or for tax reporting. I mean, it is a potential big gap in the regulation and in the tax law, and nobody, I think, as of yet knows what to do with that. So, to the extent there was any genius behind this original provision, it was sort of, well, we got to start capturing this unregulated area of commerce, but this certainly wasn't the place to do it. It wasn't the way to do it. I think if Congress wants to look at this, they're probably going to need to hold hearings, get testimony, understand what the industry looks like, and figure out what legal and technological solutions there might be for the government to get more information on what's going on decentralized exchanges. This just wasn't the time or the place to do it.
So my fear on this, I have two questions. One about the actual regulations, but one is about the process here. My fear actually right now is the infrastructure bill has a lot of momentum. It's finally moving. You've got the problem solver caucus behind it. You have like the rational members, let's call it, of Congress being like, okay, we're going to find a bipartisan agreement here. And this, to your point, is a relatively, I think future implications are massive, but in the short term, it's a relatively small thing to be hung up about. But the bill as it stands right now is that nothing would be implemented in the earliest until 2023. So from your perspective, is there a world where they pass this as is or something close to it that we hate from the crypto community, but we can amend it, change it, or just change implementation of it in a couple of years when the rubber meets the road?
I doubt it. I really think the provision will pass. Maybe the revenue score will have to be changed on it. Maybe it'll be revised down from 28 billion to some lower amount. But I think there's general consensus that requiring cryptocurrency exchanges to file information reports with the IRS, that's a no-brainer. Yep. Requiring Bitcoin transactions over $10,000 to be included in cash reporting forms, that's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. And the broker definition will be narrowed. I think Bloomberg reported today that Wyden and Toomey are working on narrowing the language for the broker definition, and I think that's going. I find it hard to believe that this expanded definition of broker is going to make its way into the final version of the infrastructure bill. I guess it's theoretically possible, but I just think Congress, there's no need to have such a bomb thrown into the infrastructure bill. They just need to raise some revenue. They probably are going to be able to do that by just tightening up the information report, using the existing definition of broker that's already in the tax code that everyone already agrees on, and just getting this through, getting some more revenue attached to the bill, and getting some more information going to the IRS from Coinbase and Kraken and the other normal exchanges.
My other question is, so I have a good amount of experience personally with financial regulations. I worked on Wall Street for a while. I took the Series 7 and 66 and my CFA and they take so many, the wealth management accredited advisor, whatever the hell they made me take. And then I've worked in the implementation of a whole bunch of, or working around or with compliance and legal. And this is my thought on financial regulations. I'm curious your thoughts what this means for crypto. So I think smart regulations are needed and are very good, right? Where FDIC insurance, a big one, knowing your customer. There's some really, really important, I call it baseline stuff to be doing financial transactions, particularly when it comes to consumer risks. I think the clients need to know what they're getting into. But the biggest problem with regulation is that most of the time, especially some of the really complicated stuff, banks and financial institutions just get around them. And what they do is they end up lawyering up and hiring compliance experts and handling all the extra paperwork and It makes it hard. It makes it slower to do business, and it makes it more expensive. And that doesn't actually, frankly, hurt the bank very much. It makes it like a pain in their butt. But it hurts the consumer because it's a commodity business, frankly, and they just pass that down. So what happens is the business is slower and more expensive for people who actually are trying to use the product, not actually helping them avoid getting into a transaction or lose their shirt. Thoughts on that? I mean, I guess from your perspective, how would you regulate the crypto industry? Because what we love about it, there's a lot of reasons to love it. There's also a piece of why we love it is because it's not so regulated and it's a little faster, and you don't have to go to Chase and do that. I mean, you remember last time we waited in the lobby of a bank for something, it takes forever. So thoughts on what we could do to regulate this without actually hurting the crypto community and or consumer?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on exactly the main issue. So this definition of broker is a critical one. And as you can imagine, if you're an investment bank lobbyist right now, you probably want to tighten the screws in the cryptocurrency industry because when, in the 1990s and 2000s and so forth, any financial transactions in America went through a broker, and they are held by a custodian. And that's how the regulatory system was set up. And the brokers and custodians, they take a fee on every transaction that they facilitate.
The whole industry set up around middlemen and women.
It's a whole industry set up around middlemen, and it creates enormous fees for banks. And it gives regulators an easy place to say, oh, here's where we go to look when we have questions. And so everybody's making money off of the system. And now cryptocurrency disrupts the system. Suddenly, I can do a transaction with you, Zach or Carly, and we don't have to pay a broker. We can do a complicated derivative transaction or lending transaction just between ourselves and do it through a smart contract, and we don't have to pay a broker. We don't have to pay a custodian.
Right.
And so that's very good for the consumer in a lot of ways. But you can imagine the government and banks want to say, wait a second, this is an unregulated, dangerous activity. We got to get back everybody into the traditional broker system. I don't think that's where this is going to end up. I mean, now that we've discovered a way to do permissionless transactions without brokers and custodians, I think there's going to be just a tremendous pressure on finance to go into those areas through smart contracts. The question is, how does the government get its claws into it? And that is a tricky one.
Because not only do you not need a broker now for us to have that transaction, like we don't even really need to know who each other is to do that transaction, right? And so how do you, if you can't know your customer data, how does the government possibly get involved? Is that sort of the fundamental problem here?
That is the fundamental problem. So the government could take a very aggressive stance in a number of ways. One, it's like the language that proposed in the infrastructure bill, just expand the definition of broker. Anybody that touches anything is a broker, and that would be difficult to implement. Another way the government could take an aggressive stance is to look at the Controlled Substances Act. So the manufacture, distribution, and production of controlled substances like crack cocaine, those are all illegal. But also what is illegal is profiting from the manufacture, distribution, or production of controlled substances. So if the government was to take a very aggressive approach, they could say, fine, we're having trouble regulating decentralized exchanges, but anybody that profits from a decentralized exchange is engaged in these illegal activities or in these reportable activities, and they could just try to bring the hammer down on anybody that profits from the technology. I think that would be a really drastic solution. There's probably ways in between, but what's going to be requires for the government to sit down, hold hearings, understand the technology, talk to people that have developed decentralized exchanges, and say, is there an easy way for us to code in tax reporting into this decentralized exchange? Like perhaps if you have a decentralized exchange, you could have a way to where the government is just sort of seamlessly getting information about the transactions on the exchange, and everybody that participates in the exchange knows that that's taking place. And maybe there's some additional cost there, but you're still saving money because you don't have to go through Goldman Sachs and UBS in order to design your financial instruments. You can imagine there's going to be, as soon as the banking industry and regulated industries wake up and realize what crypto offers and what is currently taking place, and that more money is moving into these decentralized exchanges, they're going to be lobbying for heavy duty regulation of cryptocurrency, right. Or they're going to be lobbying to make sure they get a large chunk of these profits.
They get to play.
Right. But so we're still we're not at that point yet where everyone really, I don't think Congress and investment banks have even realized what's at stake yet, or they're just starting to now.
Right. And I've been joking with Carly a lot. It's like the crypto, as cool as it is, it's this really incredible community I've wading into myself. But the way it becomes mainstream is when my mother can have a crypto wallet relatively easily, who's in her 60s. And that's never going to happen if there's a chance my mother could be sending her money to someone that's funding terrorism or God knows what, right? So there's that step, and it's not the next step, but it's a step eventually, and that's when your players start to get involved. And the happy medium to figure out is how do we stay decentralized, but also centralized enough to open up to the mainstream.
And democratized, right? I think part of the promise of crypto is the democratization aspect, which, the accessibility there in some ways. I mean, it's not technologically accessible because it's a little complicated, but it's accessible in terms of there aren't the same barriers to entry as being an investor in traditional finance in some ways. Right. Okay, I have two questions. One is to prompt you to an anecdote that if you don't really want to share or say, we can cut. My first question, which will lead into the second, there was a big tweet thread that I think got a lot of traction as the crypto community was starting to freak out about this infrastructure bill. And one of the sort of claims in it was that there actually isn't a lot of tax evasion happening in the crypto community, though that is the impression among the government, is that there's tax evasion everywhere. You work with a whole bunch of, frankly, crypto whales in paying taxes. What is your take on how much tax evasion there really is in the crypto community?
I would say it's a similar amount of tax evasion as to any industry that doesn't get regular reports. Cash businesses, let's say, local restaurants or taxi cab drivers. That there's, whenever you have an industry, and this is the whole reason for this controversy in the infrastructure, but whenever you have an industry that all of their transactions are not automatically reported to the IRS, you're going to see more people deciding not to report all of what they did in the last year to the IRS. I think there's a substantial amount of tax dollars being paid on cryptocurrency gains. A lot of people, even without mandatory reporting, we still have a pretty good voluntary reporting system in America. Most Americans want to do the right thing, pay their taxes, report their income to the IRS. But it's probably consistent with other industries where the IRS doesn't automatically know. So what's to stop you from trying to not report everything?
The on your honor system, which is not sustainable for the government. Anyway.
You and I have talked privately about this a couple times, and you told me sort of a story that I thought was funny, comparing trying to advise crypto people on how they should pay their taxes versus advising people in other industries on how to pay their taxes, and the call it aggressive risk-taking appetite of the different communities. I think it's kind of funny to hear you talk about that. Do you know what I'm saying there?
Oh yeah. So okay. So your previous question dealt with whether people are being honest on their tax returns or not. This question is dealing with whether people are taking aggressive positions. I really distinguish the two in my mind.
Yes. Let's say they should be distinguished. Yeah. One is the IRS has issued clear guidance and you're not abiding by it. The second is they haven't issued clear guidance, so it's up to you to figure out what you want to do.
Right. Yeah. So if you work as a tax professional with people in different industries, you see there's very different cultures across different industries. If I am working with someone in traditional finance and they ask me how to report a certain item on their tax return, what they want to know is, how do I report this to make sure there's no chance I'm going to be audited, the IRS is going to challenge my reporting. Pretty much, I would say about 80 or 90% of people I talk to in cryptocurrency, when I tell them, here are the 5 different ways you can report this from most conservative to most aggressive. They will go with the most aggressive. And if I tell them, well, this might mean, you're going to have to like challenge this in tax court and spend tremendous amount of money and time fighting the IRS on this to prove that you're right. The response among cryptocurrency investors almost uniformly is, "Oh, that's okay. I am willing to fight the IRS." And you don't see that. You don't see that in other industries. Cryptocurrency investors are very excited to advocate for more favorable cryptocurrency tax provisions, even if it is at a huge cost to themselves and their time and money.
It's like they'd rather fight the government. I think they'd rather fight the government to make the point. It's more about making the point to them than it is even maximizing their own profit. Because if they're fighting in court, then they're spending money on that.
Are most of these folks younger males?
There's younger males. You already have a very libertarian leaning group.
Yeah.
People that got into cryptocurrency are more interested in alternatives to government control over everything. And then the other aspect of it is you just have a greater tolerance for risk because cryptocurrency investments, as opposed to traditional equity investment or working in used car sales or other industries, is extremely risk heavy.
Yeah, I don't think young male is really the differentiator, because you're talking about the finance industry writ large. That's,
well, no, I was going to say, for what it's worth, like the textbook case of like evaluating risk profiles, like men typically are riskier with their money. Younger men or younger people in general are more riskier with their money, have a higher risk profile. And literally there's like, we have algorithm at UBS, you'd have algorithms. If you were putting an older female into a riskier profile, that would flag, and you'd have to give sign off, the manager would have to sign off on like breaking sort of risk profiles. So this is just the numbers. I mean, maybe the books are probably a little dated, but that is what at least a lot of the psychological studies and studies of wealth management have shown. So that does not surprise me. Plus the crypto community in general, I think, is used to things going to the moon and losing their shirt on a number of investments, which for a lot of us makes it fun. But if we want to go mainstream, it has to be a little less of a roller coaster and more of a maybe merry-go-round. Dashiell, what are you, as we wrap this up, as this bill gets ironed out, but even like further looking down the pike, what are you keeping your eyes on for the crypto community in the regulation space?
Well, I think we should all be very sensitive and alert to arguments that cryptocurrency is dangerous, is unregulated. And I think we should ask, whenever we start hearing lobbyists and congressional representatives talking in those terms, who is behind this and who is benefiting from this? I don't think we've seen a full court press against crypto yet, but I'm certain that it's coming. As soon as UBS and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan start to feel a hit to their equity derivatives business and trading business, and soon as more of that revenue starts going into decentralized exchanges and lending pools and staking and design your own loan, design your own derivative products, we're gonna see a pushback like the likes of which you've never seen before in U.S. political history. And we're just not there yet. But I think this little flare up in the infrastructure bill is a little preview of what's coming.
I gotta say, I like crypto's chances. I think if GameStop or Reddit bros can bring down Melvin Capital, I feel like the entirety of the crypto army can fight the rest of these institutions. But that's maybe the underdog optimist in me.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think crypto is here to stay. It's just, what is the regulatory landscape going to look like in 10 years, and that is up for grabs.
Look, the reason this is exciting is because we're talking about this because no one's talking about it, and the time to freak out is when everybody's talking about it, because that means there are forces at play that are going to probably shaping both the narrative and the outcome here.
The one corner of this that we haven't really touched in this conversation is also Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell's sort of position on crypto, which has sort of been evolving. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you think we'll end up with like a CBDC that they try to use to put like other stable coins out of business. Is there anything on that you want to say, Dashiell? Central bank digital currency. So like governments issuing their own proprietary cryptos, basically. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dashiell, or is that something we should address as we're looking at the future regulatory landscape of all this?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a regulatory battle for control over cryptocurrencies. It's also SEC, CFTC, IRS, and there's just going to be a realization that this is not a fad. Right now, I think if you talk to most people in government, they think that cryptocurrency is just a speculative investment. It's something that a bunch of people made a lot of money on, and they don't really understand it as an alternative financial technology to our current system, and that it represents a real threat to regulators, investment banks, and brokers, custodians, exchanges, and that it represents an alternative way of doing business, which is cuts out fees, cuts out regulators, and nobody's really thought through how to deal with it. And I think that realization is starting to dawn on policymakers and regulators, but we're still in the very early stages of that. And as soon as more funds start flowing into cryptocurrency and people start playing around with the technologies and understanding what's out there, they're going to say, wait a second, we need to redesign our regulatory system to address this. And that's going to be a real fight.
I'm fascinated to watch this because when I was at UBS, I used to joke with the team. I was like, our tech was so bad, still is. I say our, like, I guess they raised me, if you will. I was there for 8 or 9 years. But we're so bad, and we couldn't. When you've got platforms that you can see how much money you have, you can make trades instantly. I can send Venmo in. Like, there's all these instant transactions that happen at your fingertips through your smartphone technology, ignoring the blockchain. And UBS is not even close to that, right? And a lot of these big banks are not. I think Chase and Bank of America are pretty good in the app side and the retail side, but that's about it. But
yeah, you said their systems are like duct taped together.
Yeah, they're all
get you in trouble with UBS now,
like they're awful. But what has protected? Like they should have died, right? If you want to look at it, like they are Kodak in a digital world, right?
Yeah.
But what has protected them, and a number of other industries too, but this one in particular is the moat of regulation around their business. It's a moat that protects them. And so literally there for 10 years almost, and every time there was a new tech coming, like, this is going to kill us, and it hasn't, and it keeps thriving. Even the remote world, when we all went, during COVID, everybody locked down, UBS was thriving. So I am fascinated to see, does this blow it all up or just come part of it? I think there's pros and cons to both sides, frankly, because I think having a generally regulated I think our capital markets are a financial treasure, or a national treasure of this country.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best parts about America. It can create some of the worst parts too, in terms of inequality, things like that. But being able to raise money for any idea in the United States is great. So that's what we should all be. That's the fun part to watch. I think it's going to be wild to see if it bakes, if it just steps in line with the regulatory process, or these big banks are bleeding. We're going to find out.
I find this really fun. I feel like giggly.
It is fun. It is fun. Because they do have a weird form of monopoly on, let's call it a commodity, like investment. All the banks are technically the same. Technically, like there's some areas of expertise at each one, but they charge a lot of fees. So we'll see. But Dashiell, I love doing conversation like this when I learn, and I know very little, not very little, but like the tip of the iceberg on crypto. So thank you for not making me feel too stupid and teaching me. And pleasure to be with you, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Dashiell.
All right. Dashiell, blowing my mind, which is great. Good find, Carly. Thank you for teaching me as always. Here's what I want to close with very, very quickly. Conspiracy alert.
Yo, sad conspiracy alert. Though.
It's a sad conspiracy, but
we need like a tinfoil hat for you to wear.
I need a tinfoil hat. I need something ridiculous, but I'm freaking out. So I don't have enough research on it, but I'm planting a seed because I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this. I'm going to get to my little like detective hat on. So this is, okay, what is happening? The Capitol riots on January 6th, there were the Metropolitan and the Pentagon police departments. there were a bunch of cops and officers that protected the Capitol. And since January 6th, four of those cops have committed suicide. And three of them...
we know there weren't that many who were there anyway. Like, it's not 4 out of the entire U.S. military. Like, this was...
No, it was 4, probably like 100 or so in the pictures. Yeah. I don't think it was 100. I mean, it's probably 50 to 100. They haven't released those numbers. You can just kind of gather from pictures. It was like semi-defended, but 4 have committed suicide. And 3 of them, they have not released their deaths. So Officer Gunther Hashida was found
not
dead
released
in his
the
home.
details of their death.
The details of their deaths, excuse me.
We just know they killed themselves, but we really don't know anything beyond that.
So Officer Gunther Hashida was found dead in his home on Thursday of last week, was confirmed this week. And then hours after that announcement, the chief confirmed that a 26-year-old Kyle DeFreytag was committed suicide on July 10th as well. And then Howard Liebengood died by suicide days after the insurrection. And DC officer Jeffrey Smith died by suicide later the month in January, shortly after the attack. So that's 4. And my heart goes out to those families because that had to have been a traumatizing experience. They are fighting over whether these deaths were in the line of duty.
Wait, what do you mean?
So the department is saying it was not in the line of duty. This was a suicide. And the families are going to argue that it was in the line of duty.
For the 3 of the 4? Or for all of them?
I believe all of them are arguing this. And they're going to probably... Because it has to do with the pension, I imagine. Because they get a pension payout if you're killed in the line of duty. I don't know if
so is the argument... So for folks that were found at home dead, the argument is this was still like a workplace hazard, essentially, or that this was trauma induced by being in the line of duty, and therefore...
Okay. Or where my conspiracy theory is going up is that there's something deeper, Jeffrey Epstein shit. So I don't know. Any Yang Gang can go down this rabbit hole, dig in, let me know.
I do think
I don't mean this by any disrespect to families. I don't want to make light of their deaths. I'm very, very clear. This is serious, and it's and look, if it's just like above board, like this is just really sad. But if something fishy's going on, I would like to get to the bottom of it. I would like to understand why.
That does seem so strange. I mean, I'm sure, obviously being a cop, tough job, not trying to get political with this or with that, but, you can imagine a lot of trauma, PTSD, that can result in suicide. So I'm sure you have a higher rate of death by suicide among cops in general, but that does seem like an exceptional number.
And very underreported, very hush-hush.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a sensitivity to the families. When you talk about 3 of the 4 details haven't been reported, I mean, that might be partly the families not wanting those details out yet. To your point, if they're trying to argue that this was in the line of duty for pension reasons, for funding reasons, whatever, they might not want details being reported.
So this could all be normal, but it could be a conspiracy, and I'm digging into it. So that's what we're leaving you with, y'all. Come back next Thursday. Maybe I'll have more info on that. We'll talk about something else that's awesome. Enjoy your week, folks. Talk to you soon.